Hi, welcome to Fiberchats. My name is Irina. I'm the host here, and my guest today comes from Finland, Johanna. Hi, welcome to my channel.
Hi, Irina.
So I saw your designs on Instagram first, and I love how like traditional they are, but you have also your own sort of input into them. It's you bringing them to the modern world. Tell me a little bit about like how old were you when you started knitting? Who taught you? Like where did you start?
I'm pretty sure I don't actually remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure I learned how to knit before going to school. But here in Finland, everyone is taught to knit in school on the third grade, so that's my earliest memories of it. But I started knitting like really properly all the time around the clock when I was 15 years old.
Well, do you remember like what pushed you into knitting? Like what did you find? Because 15 years old, I mean, have a lot of things on their mind and knitting might not be the priority.
I loved doing all sorts of crafts, and back in junior high here in Finland, you get to choose some subjects for school, and I chose crafts. And on the last year on ninth grade, our last project was to knit a sweater. All of us made a sweater for ourselves, and the sweater turned out okay. It was fine. I wore it and all. But my classmate had made a sweater that looked so much better. Like she had chosen a better stitch pattern and a better yarn, nicer colors. And frankly, I got jealous. Like I was looking at her sweater and looking at the one I made, and I was thinking, why does my sweater look like this and hers looks so good? And then I kind of just um, decided that I'm gonna start from scratch, learn everything from scratch again because I want to learn how to make sweaters that look that good. And that's how it started.
Well, how did you learn? Because like, it's not just something that they show you stitches in school. Like what was your learning process like? Did you look through books? Did you go on YouTube? Like how did you learn?
I'm not sure if YouTube existed back then.
Right.
Here in Finland, basically everyone knows how to knit. They teach you at schools, but also everyone's mom knows. Both of my grandmothers were knitters, and so I've always known how to do it. I didn't have to look up books. I know, even though I don't remember, that my mom has been teaching me. And back then, when I was in ninth grade and started really knitting more at home, I I didn't have money for any yarns, so I had some yarn ends some leftovers from my mom, and I would I would use to spend my nights like watching TV and knitting. And when I would run out of yarn, I just pick it all apart and then start again with the same yarn over and over again.
Well, it's like more entertainment per yard, right? For per
Yes.
meter. Do you remember first time, like, did you ever follow the pattern? Like when you were studying it in school, was there a pattern to follow it? Were you a designer from like day one?
I think the first project we did back at school was like a garter stitch scarf, so you wouldn't need a pattern for that. But the next one, I think, were socks or mittens. So yeah, there was a pattern to follow, but just a very basic pattern, nothing fancy there. But I do remember that not everyone could go through the pattern and make a pair of mittens or a pair of socks. So what would happen was that at the end of the year in springtime, there were folks that had a pair of mittens or a pair of socks, and others would have like a sock puppet because they could only finish one.
Do you remember loving it like back then in the early age, or was it like because when we go to school and we have to and everybody has to learn, not everybody loves it. Did you love it back then?
I've always loved doing crafts. Like I wasn't especially in love with knitting. I was just in love with all kinds of crafts back then. But then, at 15 years old, I really fell in love with knitting because I was so much better at it than at sewing.
Right.
It came much easier.
Do you remember like your approach to picking patterns? Like what attracted you as a teenager? Like, what were you going for?
Well, back then, I wasn't aware of the internet, basically. All I had were these Finnish magazines that you could buy at the supermarket, and there were like one or two magazines that you could pick from. So I would buy the magazine, flip through it, and find like one or two things that I liked. So I would follow patterns somewhat at the beginning, but then pretty soon I started making up my own stuff because there weren't so many options available.
Do you remember the first pattern that like you designed for yourself, by yourself, like not necessarily published, but just like your first design?
I've always been a sweater knitter. It was some sort of a sweater, but I don't remember exactly.
Well, at what point did you decide to announce to the world that you are a designer and start publishing patterns and turn it into a business?
Do you know, I had this dream of being a fashion designer from way back when I was like 7 years old. We had this one American soap opera on the like daytime soap here in the Finnish television, The Bold and the Beautiful, which I know most Americans haven't even heard of, at least when I I talk about this with them. But so we had this soap opera that my dad used to watch, and I would start watching it before I could even read the subtitles because we don't dub any programs here on the telly. We have subtitles and everything. So my dad would read out loud what they were saying to me, and so the point of Bold and Beautiful was that it was a kind of a fashion house drama. So I would start dreaming of becoming a fashion designer one day. But then I grew up and found out that I wasn't very good at drawing or sewing. So I had to find something else. And eventually I turned to knitting. At the beginning, I didn't have any plans of turning into a designer, but at some point when I was studying at the university here, my friend asked me if I would like to start a knitting blog with her. So we started that, and at the beginning, it was just us sharing our projects and our knitting. But quite soon, I had this dream that somehow I wanted to turn it into a profession for myself, even though I had no clue how that could actually happen in practice. And then just over the years, the dream became just something I was thriving for more and more. So in the end, I realized that I could actually start designing patterns and selling those. So at the beginning, I had a couple patterns that I shared for free on the blog, and then slowly started to go for selling patterns on Ravelry.
Most of your patterns that you sell, they all in English, right? Was
Yeah,
that
they're in
your
English and in
decision
Finnish.
from the start, like that you're gonna go into the international market?
Yeah, Finland is quite a small country, so there isn't that much room for many successful knitwear designers here in a way that you could provide for yourself with knitwear designing. So it was important to do this internationally from the get-go.
So do you remember how your first design was received? Was it like immediate smashing success?
No, like the first pattern I put up for sale on Ravelry, I think I haven't checked recently, but I think there are like maybe 50 copies sold, so not much. But the second one, the second pattern I designed, I that sold a lot more. And then I remember, yeah, maybe that was also like the next year, the following year, I did this cardigan design for the summer called Soulful Cardigan. And I don't remember how many copies it sold during the first month, but I remember that that was like the first time that I started to think that maybe, just maybe, this could actually be possible to do this.
I mean, have you ever looked back and thought, oh shoot, I should have just like done something else with my life? Like, have you ever
No,
questioned the
like this has been my dream from 7 years old. So
well, tell me about how it happens in real life now, right? Like the dream is one thing, and to have one successful pattern is something, a start, right? But how do you manage that as your career? Because people always say like, oh, it's impossible to make money as a knitwear designer or crochet designer. How did you do it?
It's a combination of many things. Like, I think the biggest thing for myself is that I'm very efficient and really tenacious. Like, I don't give up when I've decided on something. It's not easy, but it is possible to make a career out of this. But it requires really just being persistent, publishing a pattern after a pattern, even though most of them don't sell that much. But you just have to keep on going. And you have to be really, you just really have to have your heart in it. Like, it takes a lot of time to advertise on social media and do all these things, but it it's so worth it.
Well, I mean, when you think about your life, right, you have to come up with the idea of design. You have to create a pattern. You have to grade the pattern. You have to test knit it. You have to sample knit it. You have to publish it, take pictures, advertise. How do you find time for all of that?
Well, I do this for a living, so that is all I do. I don't have to allocate time for other jobs. Luckily, um, it takes up a lot of time. Like, you can't really start calculating like an hourly wage for yourself when you're knitting. That's just not worth it. It wouldn't be minimum pay. Like, what I do for myself is that I consider the hours I spend on the computer. Those are my working hours. And then when I'm knitting on my samples, I feel like that's my free time.
I mean, that's probably the beauty of it when your job is your hobby and your hobby is your job. You're getting the best of both worlds.
Yeah,
Well,
and I do sometimes take a vacation from designing, and even though I'm on a vacation, I'm still knitting, but then I decide to knit on someone else's pattern.
well, tell me about like how you come up with the ideas for your patterns. Are they like you are very math inclined, right?
Yeah.
So like is that you coming from the math point of view or the arts point of view? How does your ideas happening?
I think more from the math point of view, but it all starts with an idea. Sometimes you're in the zone, you have such a good flow and ideas just keep coming, and then it's easy to go from there. But sometimes you have deadline needs you have promised to do on time, and your mind can just go blank. And then it's going to take hours and hours on the computer trying to find inspiration from somewhere, and it can be a real pain in the butt sometimes. But once you have the idea of what you want to do, then it's all maths for me.
Well, where do
I
ideas come from? Like, what inspires you? Is it nature? Is it folk tales? Is it some antique sculptures? Like, where do you get your inspirations?
mostly nature and photography. Like, I I very often have this idea of how I want to photograph and knit, and then I have to design something for that for the photograph
Oh, that's
for
brilliant.
the photo.
So you're going
I
from
think that's
Instagram post into the actual design,
yeah,
not the other way around.
yeah.
I
I'm
mean,
funny that way.
well, like when you take a picture, sometimes when you look with your naked eye on something, and then you're trying to take a picture and you can't capture the colors or something, like you can't, like what you see is not what's on picture, right? Do you ever get the same stuff with your designs, like when you imagine something and then it just doesn't come
All the time.
out?
That happens all the time. You think you have the best idea ever, and then you start to try it out in practice, and quite quickly you realize this is never going to happen like the way you intended it to.
Well, when you think about yoke sweaters specifically, how are you trying to plan it? Like, do you try to think like there's going to be minimum empty spaces there and you're gonna fill it up, or do you have like specific plan in place, like specific design in place before you start locating? Like, how does that happen?
For yoked sweaters, I usually have to have a theme. Like here you can see these reeds, like that sway on the beach. You have to have a theme where you start going from, but then it's about thinking of patterns that are narrow enough to fit into a yoke chart, because you can't go too wide, otherwise it's going to be a pain to try to grade the pattern. So it's best to have patterns that are quite narrow. And then also, as you said, you need to fill up the empty spaces. You have to come up with, it's best if you can come up with a pattern, like a bigger pattern that fills up the whole thing. But then sometimes that doesn't happen, and then you have to fill it up with all sorts of little like dots or flowers or leaves.
Do
But
you enjoy that process, or does that like, what's your favorite part of the whole designing process?
calculating, like that is my thing. I used to be I used to, or I still have a PhD in statistics, so mathematics and programming. And I still use all those math skills in my job as a knitwear designer, because as you probably know, most of knitwear designing is just calculating. It's just grading and trying to figure out the maths to make it work. So it's a lot of fun when you love maths.
Right.
I actually as I said, my thing is that I think I'm super efficient when it comes to designing. My husband is also a statistician, and he's even better at programming than I am. So we've done some code writing together, and I have these like long codes on my computer where you can just basically put in the width of your yoke design, like how many stitches you want to end up with, and then your gauge. And then you can just basically press a button and out comes a pattern.
You make it sound like it's so simple. I'm sure it's not that easy.
Yeah, there's always a bunch of stuff you have to go fix in later on, but the basic idea is that.
Do you ever keep track of how many meters of yarn you used up on every design and how much you use per year?
I I always calculate my yardage very meticulously, because you have to do that to get yardage estimates for the patterns. I don't do that too often, but like every year I like to go and check how many meters I've been knitting on Ravelry, because that lists everything for you.
Well, throw a number at me. Like, what are we talking about?
Um, it's 20 to 30 kilometers per year, about.
Do you ever drive 30 kilometers and think like, I needed all that? Well, how planned are you in your upcoming designs? Like, do you have everything planned for this year already? Who you gonna, when you're gonna post, what you're gonna do, when you're gonna test knit?
I usually don't plan too much ahead, but this this year particularly has been such that I've been getting so many collaboration requests by email that I have actually filled up the rest of my year. So this year I can't take on anything anymore, to try and leave some room for breathing as well. But usually I don't plan too much ahead. I love to live in the moment, and like I want to wake up and then decide what I want to do this today. I don't like it if my calendar is filled up too far ahead. So it's always great if you can have designs ready to be published for the next like 3 or 4 months. But further than that, I don't want to do it.
Do you feel like it takes the joy out of the artistic side of the
Yeah,
business?
yeah. I don't want to be too organized. Like I do also this tea time live shows on Instagram, And I know many people do knitting podcasts on YouTube, and then they usually do a bunch of editing before publishing those podcasts, and it's hours and hours of work before you get the final episode. And that's not me. So I love to do these live shows on Instagram where I'm usually late when I'm starting the show. Like I tell people that I'll start at 7 p.m. and then I show up at 7:05. And it's just me and my knitting. It's what I'm working on at the moment and what I've been knitting on that week. And it's just me in my regular clothes, often with no makeup and no hair done. And I'm here in real time.
Right.
And I'm the same with my knitwear designing, but I like to do things now.
Well, when I look at your designs, they vary different. You use cables sometimes, you use yokes sometimes. So some sweaters are like very simple and some are more complicated. Do you always have an audience in mind when you design?
Um, I try to be a little bit organized by going through what's popular at the moment, for example, on Ravelry. And usually what I've been finding nowadays is that people want simple designs at the moment, something you don't have to think about. And that's actually really challenging for me because I like to knit things that require attention and concentration and challenge you. So it's a challenge for me always to design something simple because I know those designs sell the best.
Right.
But sometimes I give myself permission to do whatever I want, and then out comes a sweater with 15 different cables and naps and brioche and whatever.
Well, how those sell? Do they sell anyway? Because people just
I feel it's just impossible to know which designs are gonna do well sales wise. Like it happens so often that I'm super excited about a design and I think that it's gonna be the next big hit. And then three people buy the pattern. And then often I have designs that where I'm not so convinced myself, and then those become the big things. Like it's impossible to predict what is going to sell and when.
well, how do you deal with disappointment? Like if you know, because like I'm friends with a lot of designers and it's a process. Like you have to come up with the idea, you have to knit it, you have to put the pattern, you test, you swatch. It's like it takes a long time. And then you publish and you hold your breath and nothing happens, like crickets. How do you lift yourself up again and try again?
Well, first of all, you just take the day off and don't lift yourself up for that day. You just soak in the misery for one day. And then you go through all your older patterns and remember all the ones that are like keeping your business afloat, even though there are those patterns that never sell that much. So it's my husband always he has this funny thing. He calls my design portfolio like oh no, now I don't remember what that word is in English. Like if you have your if you buy stocks.
Like a stock portfolio.
Yeah, yeah. So he thinks a design portfolio is kind of like a stock portfolio because you have these things, you have done them once, and then they keep on selling for years and years on, and you don't have to really do much about them. So you're kind of just building up your portfolio all the time.
What would you advise to like young designers who think like should they try to turn it into career or should they not even bother? Like what would be your advice?
My advice is just to think about what type of a person you are. Like if it takes stamina and tenacity and it takes guts in a sense. So you have to know yourself and know if this is something you're willing to like go all in for because it does take a lot, but it is totally doable, I think. So it's I feel it's a matter of the type of person you are. You just have to kind of have the will inside yourself.
I was at Vogue Knitting this year and I saw interview with Jorge Locatelli and she was saying how she's actually like not popular in Argentina at all because everybody in Argentina knows how to knit and nobody needs designs. Do you feel the same way about Finland? Like, are you popular in your own country?
It depends on the crowd. Like there are some hardcore knitters who all know who I am. And then there are these there are so many knitters here who have no clue, have never heard my name. Like I think it's not really a matter of where you live. Like some people in Finland know me and some don't. I just found out this couple of months ago. I bumped into some designer on Instagram that I had never heard of. And then I go to see their profile and they have like over 100,000 followers. So that makes me think that if there are designers that are that big and I haven't heard of them before, like there is so much potential out there. Like you shouldn't worry about how many people know you at the moment. You can just be excited for the potential that is out there because there's just millions and millions of knitter. And if most of them have never heard of you, it's a good thing because they can learn about you.
Right. Well, what do you think puts you apart from all the other designers in the industry? Like, do you think you have your distinct style? Do you think you teach people something that other people don't?
I do think I have my own distinct style. As you said, it's quite nostalgic and romantic. I sometimes think that it's I have this nostalgia for the fashion of the 40s. Don't know why, but it has something on me. But I do try to bring that old world romantic vibe to today. I want to make knitwear designs that are as usable today as they will be in 10 or 20 years. So I try to do something timeless. But as to if I have something to give that others don't, that's a harder question because there are so many talented knitwear designers, and I certainly don't think I'm better or in a sense unique in some way compared to them. We all have something to give, and mostly it's just our love knitting.
Well, do you think there is space for everyone? Because there's like, I mean, sometimes you go to Ravelry and it feels so saturated, right? Like, let's say I'm on Ravelry and I'm like just looking for a sweater to knit in DK yarn. And then there is like 200,000 sweater patterns, right? So to stand out, it's becoming more and more difficult. This the opportunity that Ravelry provides to for everybody to self-publish, right? Do you feel like it's a uphill battle all the time?
Sometimes it gets to you, and especially if you publish a design that doesn't sell at all. Those are the days that you go through Ravelry and think that I'm never gonna live up to all of these people or get my chance for a day in the spotlight. But then I don't really I think that we shouldn't as designers we shouldn't view other designers as competition, but like colleagues. I always when I'm chatting with other designers, we I always like to talk about this. You shouldn't think that we're competition. I I very much dislike if someone kind of tries to keep it all closed in, not talk about how they work because I'm very an open book. Like when I'm chatting with other designers, I give up all my tricks. Like I want us to help each other. I don't think it's taking anything away from me if I'm helping another designer.
Right. No, I mean, it's definitely building the whole community. And you probably
Yeah,
can learn from others as much as you teach your tricks. You can learn some other tricks from others as well. So it's like it benefits everyone, you know, we're all raising each other up. What's your favorite part about having a name, having some fame in the world of knitting?
getting nice yarn. That's the best thing.
I mean,
It's
honestly,
also
like
nice
I
that
feel like this is how you made it. When people start offering yarn for you, you know that
yeah, that is the best part of the job. Like getting yarns that you perhaps back when you were a student you couldn't afford, and nowadays some of those companies may send you an email asking you to design something in their yarn. I'm like, okay, send it all here.
do you have a favorite? Do you have something that you always love working with?
I have so many favorites, and there are so many beautiful yarn companies and indie dyers out there. My favorite thing is just always trying something new. Back when I was working at the university, I used to go to all these conference trips overseas, and my favorite thing was just searching a local yarn shop and then going there and telling them, please sell me everything that you can get locally here, like stuff that I can't get back home.
Right. Do you knit with Finnish yarns?
Yes, a lot.
Like, what's your favorite company there?
There are too many. There are dozens of wonderful indie dyers here, and then there are these couple really great companies that produce Finnish yarn from Finnish wool. I'm actually working with Finnish at the moment.
I went to a farm tour, and one of the farms had Finnish sheep there, and the wool is just like so soft, and it's super warm because you guys live in colder climates, so they probably born for that.
Yeah,
Do you
it really
prefer like
depends.
natural colors? Do you prefer like undyed yarn, or do you have favorite colors?
I do like both undyed natural colors and also dyed. It depends what I'm working on. Like for sweaters, I prefer neutral colors. My friends used to tease me about loving all these things that I call uncolors or non-colors because you can't really even tell them apart. Like
Right.
my friends would bring me two different shades of powdery pink and tell me that you'll probably want to do stripes with these. So for sweaters, I really love muted non-colors, but then for accessories, I like to go crazy with colors. Like then bring me all the pop pinks that have been acid dyed, and yeah, I have space for all the colors in my heart.
How much of your wardrobe is made by you?
Um, Most of it,
Really?
I basically buy underwear and jeans from the shops. I also sew. Nowadays, I'm quite good at sewing too, so it's
Right.
mostly dresses and skirts and then my knits.
Any tips on how to keep your needs last longer and how to take care of them?
Mm, that's a bit tricky. Like I have so many, like I have hundreds of knits, so it's easy when you wear them for one day and then you put it back on the shelf. It doesn't get dirty. Here in Finland, it's also easy because in the winter you can just take your knitting outside in the snow when it's freezing cold, and the snow will clean it. Like the snow will suck all those smells of the knit, and they will be like fresh and new when you take them back inside. So that's one thing we here in Finland do. But I just love your knits. Take care of them. Like wash them sometimes, but not in the washing machine. And I have a couple appliances here. I have a steamer, so I don't necessarily have to wash. I can just steam my sweaters, and then I just purchased this like really high-tech lint remover to take off all the pilling from my sweaters.
Right. You think like Finland and the local landscape and the local nature influences your designs?
Yes, a lot. Like nature is a big inspiration for me.
Are you like an
As
outdoorsy person?
sorry,
Are you an outdoorsy person? Do you like walking outdoors?
I'm a funny one. Like when I was a kid, I used to hate going outdoors. Like I didn't like playing outside. even still, I'm kind of an inside, indoors type of a person. But even as a kid, when it started to rain, all the other kids would come inside and I would go outside. I
What's
have a
about
bunch
the
of
rain?
I have a bunch of allergies, and I don't know if it's because of that, but when it's raining, I feel like I can breathe. And I don't know if it actually has anything to do with my allergies. It feels like I'm a flower and I'm finally getting water. Like it's better when it rains. But nowadays, I'm learning to be more of an outdoors person. We like to go hiking a lot.
Right. Do you bring knitting with you on your hikes?
Always.
So tell me about your husband. How does he perceive it all? Does he have a question why you wouldn't just go and be a statistician and use your PhD? Like, why are you doing knitting?
No, he's the one who encourages me or encouraged me to go for this career. He has seen me do the academic career, get a PhD, and do all those things. I could have been a successful researcher, but it wouldn't make me this happy.
Well, do you feel like you're living your dream?
Yes, definitely.
So where you okay, like if you're living your dream right now, where do you see this going? Like what's your vision for your business in the next, I don't know, 5, 10 years?
I get this question a lot. People often ask, where do you see yourself in 5 years and what dreams you want to realize by then? And I always give the same answer that I don't need anything more than this. If I can keep this up and provide for myself with my knitwear design, this is all I want for my life from here on out.
Love
I have a wonderful husband. We have a beautiful house, and we have an almost 2-year-old girl, which was a big dream for a long time. So right now, at this very moment, I have everything I need.
Do you think you're gonna teach her how to knit?
Yes, I've been trying to be really careful, never to tell her to not touch my yarns. Like she likes to go play with the yarn balls all around my office, and I never tell her to leave them alone because I want her to grow to love them from the get-go.
Did you ever try to teach your husband how to knit? Is he a knitter?
And no, he's not. I actually, back when it was my 29th birthday, I had a big party because I thought that it's boring that people always do those big parties when they turn 30 or
Right.
40 or 50. So I wanted to be a bit different. So I did 29. And on that birthday party, I had a little competition. There were like 4 or 5 men present and a lot of ladies who knit. So I had a little competition that all the men there had to go grab 4 women and ask them to teach them how to knit, except that the ladies couldn't touch the yarn or the needles.
Oh, they had to explain it.
Yeah, and
How did
not
that go?
I thought it would have been a lot easier. It actually ended up taking like 3 hours before someone actually won the competition. They had to cast on maybe like 20 stitches and knit garter stitch for 3 rows, and that was it.
Do they not teach boys how to knit in Finland at all? Is that just for girls?
That's mostly for girls. You get to choose if you want to do like soft crafts or hard crafts at school. But I think nowadays they do both. Like when I was a kid back then, we had to do 6 months in the wood shop
Right.
as girls, and the boys had to do 6 months. But I think they did mostly sewing and knitting.
I mean, do you think this is like life skills, like sort of like swimming that every
Yes.
every child should know how to do?
Yeah, here in school they teach you how to do crafts. They teach you also how to cook and those kind of things. Yeah, definitely life skills.
What's your favorite food to eat? What do you usually like to cook for your family?
I love food, all food, except for mushrooms and garlic. Those are bad. Don't do them. I mostly, I think I most of all love pasta.
Is
I
there like a
actually do.
traditional Finnish food that you love cooking?
Oh, that's a hard question right now. I think I'm just blacking out, trying to think of something. Oh, traditional Finnish foods. We have very specific type of Christmas foods here in Finland. Like if someone from abroad comes to Finland and then they're staying here for Christmas and go to a Christmas dinner, they're usually quite like, "Are you really gonna eat that?" We
What is
have
that?
these casseroles that are made from. You have a different casserole for potatoes. It's kind of like mashed potatoes, but a bit sweeter. And then you bake it in the oven. Then you do the similar thing with carrots and rice mixed together, and then also turnips. And the turnip casserole is my absolute favorite Finnish traditional dish.
Oh, I might have to try that. I never heard of that. That's an interesting way to deal with turnips. What happens to all the things you need? Do you wear them all? Do you give them to friends, to family? Do you make things for others?
I do sometimes give things to family and friends, but as I mostly design sweaters, they're made for me. They're photographed on me, and then I wear them. Like, I'll see if I can turn the camera a bit. You can see my sweater shelf there,
Ooh, that's a good looking shelf there.
and also there. And I have all my like my company sweaters are all here in my office. Then sweaters that I've knit with other people's patterns, those I keep in my wardrobe in the other room in our walk-in closet. But these are all my company sweaters that I've designed myself, and I wear most of them. Like it's a long circulation as there are over 100 patterns and over 100 sweaters here, but every now and then I come across like, oh, that's a nice one. I haven't worn that for a while, and then I just put it on and wear for the next.
Tell me about your friends. Like, are they all knitters? Do you gravitate towards crafters?
Most of them,
So do you ever like knit together?
yes, all the time. I just yesterday was on a little excursion with a friend. We took the train to the next city to go yarn shopping there and knitted all the way in the train.
Okay, tell me about your yarn shopping. Like, what would make you buy yarn when companies throw yarn your way for free, right? Like, what would make a yarn stand out for you to buy it?
Colors, fibers, there are a bunch of things. I especially love yarn that hasn't been super wash treated. Like I love yarn that still feels very sheepy.
Right. I mean, do you buy yarn with specific project in mind, or does yarn inspire projects?
I often buy yarn in sweater quantities so that I can design a sweater or a cardigan with it, but not more specific plans.
Right. What about Instagram? Like, what's your relationship with social media? Is that a necessary evil? Is that the place of inspiration?
I'm totally addicted. Like some people manage to work with social media in a way that they schedule everything ahead of time and then they don't have to be on for real ever. But I spend hours on Instagram daily. I find so much inspiration there, and then most of my knitting friends are there, so I keep up with them there.
Right. What about like knitting festivals? Do you go to those?
Yes, we have one here on Saturday this week, and I'm going. And then my it's organized by my local yarn shop, and they also organize a bigger festival every summer where it's a whole weekend long, and there are classes and a marketplace and everything. I love going to Knitwear knitting festivals.
Do you ever stop people who wear sweaters that you design and
Yes, all the
tell them, oh,
time.
I did that?
Yeah.
Do you remember first time seeing somebody wearing your design?
No. I've been doing this for many years, though.
Well, I hope I'm gonna run into you in one of the festivals and maybe we'll get to chat in real life. That would be absolutely lovely. I would love to see.
That would be great.
Thanks so much, Johanna. Thank you for being a guest of my channel today. I loved chatting with you and getting to know you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.